Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State.
Today in the podcast, Jasmine and I talk transition and the pressures of the unknown, and later we welcome friend, father, and mentor Tony Hebert for a discussion about what it means to embrace a whole new reality.
Today's show was brought to you by Service Credit Union. You go beyond for your family. That's why Service Credit Union goes beyond for you. Get more for your money, reach milestones sooner, and plan for the future you've earned. Service Credit Union will support you every step of the way to go further than you ever imagined. If you're driven to go beyond, you belong with Service Credit Union. Visit servicecu.org to start your journey today. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine.
We have a fantastic show for you today, including an interview with father, friend, and advocate Tony Hebert. But first, what a time to be alive.
I know, huh?
It's
Lots
wild.
of crazy things going on.
Wild, right? It's fall.
Yes.
On an election year.
Phew.
Amidst so much change and transition. How are you handling all of that?
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And, you know, being in media, in the media space, right? There's always something going on.
Yeah.
Especially during election year. That's the toughest space, I think, for people who are in media, who understand media, the media world.
Right.
Election year is a tough year.
Even the politics aside, which of course I have opinions about, but I think the idea that really hangs me up is just this notion of transition.
Yeah.
More now, because when I think about our kids, we talk a lot about children and their ability to build pathways, like that neuroplasticity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I remember that interview with Dr. Cassie Ackley and you reflecting on it about the ability of the human brain in children with that new neuroplasticity, being able to learn, to absorb, to develop. And now, you know, we're learning more about the adult brain, and that neuroplasticity is in all of us.
Absolutely.
It is. But, and this is a huge but, I think about the decades of experience that presses on that plasticity, like my behaviors, my reactions, all of those things have decades of weight of experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Behind it, you know, and then the stress of being a parent in transition.
Yeah, it's a lot, because when we think about kids, we're always thinking about how to build their resiliency during those transitions. And a lot of the times as adults, we forget how much we often reflect on our transitions and how long it actually takes for us to process them.
Yeah.
And I think that because we want to see our kids get through tough times quicker, we try to push the fast forward button, like, okay, like we met this goal, all right, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And sometimes it actually takes a little longer to process transition, and transitions can take up to a year. It can take, longer than that. And I think sometimes as adults, we forget that.
And for ourselves, like I don't really deal with something that has happened until I slam into the fallout of it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Either, a loss, a disappointment. All of a sudden I'm like flat out and I'm piling other stuff on top of it and I'm lashing out, and, when my wife and I have these conversations about like, okay, what's really going on here? You can trace,
what's deeper than that?
Right. Deeper than you being kind of a jerk. But I think I'm also mentioning this because I recently picked up the Surgeon General report that was released in late August, Parents Under Pressure, and it acknowledges, quote, "It's no wonder that so many parents are struggling, often leading them to hide their struggles, which perpetuates a vicious cycle where stress leads to guilt, which leads to more stress," end quote. You think of that piling.
Absolutely. And you have to add into the fact that we often think of our kids as a reflection of our parenting and of ourselves. And that's a lot of pressure
right there
to mount on yourself, because, you can give your kids all the tools in the world, but at the end of the day, they're people who make their own decisions. Right. And so when they do things that we're like, oh my God, and it stresses us out because it's a reflection on our parenting, then we go into like whole societal thinking, the pressures of society and how they, how people view parenting and how many different parenting styles there are and which one's the right one. And you kind of go through this cycle, even while you're transitioning, you're watching your child transition and life still goes on while you're transitioning. It just adds to that pressure.
It does. And that report too mentions the fact that 41% of parents say that they are so stressed out they can't function. 48% they're so stressed out that they are completely overwhelmed. And you feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sometimes, we're so quick to blame caregivers and say, oh, they're spending so much time on their phones or so, spending so much time with technology. And well, I mean, by the end of the day, sometimes all you really have brain function for sometimes is scrolling through your phone.
Right.
And that's really tough because you want to have the energy and you want to have the mental space to do more. But because you have so many demands on your life, sometimes there just isn't room for that level of connection that, sometimes you guilt yourself for.
It's interesting. I've been reading the same book for a year. Okay, now I used to be a ferocious reader.
Absolutely.
And now I have no mental space for that at the end of the night. It's not what I want. It doesn't bring me that kind of quiet. It feels like work, right?
Yes.
And I keep thinking it's me. Like I'm doing this thing wrong. This caregiver thing, this parenting thing, like I'm the problem. It's me.
Cue Taylor Swift.
I know. But I keep thinking is this just adulthood? Like, did our parents weather this better?
I mean, I think that's a good point. I was doing a little bit of research and I found this really, really old news clip of the 90s and how stressed out parents were in the 90s, and it was this parent who was talking about all the things that she had to do in a day.
Right.
And I just thought to myself, oh my gosh, in the 90s, like she was like basically a full-time parent. And so it was different then.
Right.
And I think about all the parents now and I'm like, some of us are working one or two jobs, to maintain the household.
Right.
Some of us are, maybe they're a stay-at-home parent during the day and go to work at night or, they're just a stay-at-home parent. There's so many different ways to parent and feel stressed out because there's different levels of stresses, right?
Maybe there's different pressure points, right? There's different layers. There's always been layers.
Yes.
But those pressure points are different. And maybe that we're just not finding, and maybe we never have. And that's where I'm really wrestling with this. Is what we're experiencing adulthood?
I think with social media reflecting right back on us, it makes us feel that way.
Okay.
It makes us feel like, this is what adulthood is supposed to be like. But in reality, we create our own realities.
Right.
So, we can create what adulthood looks like for us.
Yeah.
But with social media and society pressures, it's literally reflecting back at us.
Right.
And so I think it's hard to get past that. Is this what's supposed to be like?
Yeah. And maybe that then, because I have this paralysis and worry about my choices because of you feel that weight of the family. And for me, I think, oh my gosh, I've always been, as a younger person, really good at transitions, getting up, dusting myself off. But I feel locked in lately. Like I cannot deal with transitions adequately. And, I have my neuroplasticity. I know it. I'm still learning, but there's a fear factor that seems to be locking me in.
Absolutely. Because there's that fear of if I make a mistake or if I mess this up, can I mess up everybody in my immediate circle or family? And that pressure on its own and that fear on its own prevents us from making a lot of important, decisions or transitions that we have to make in life.
Have you made any lately?
I made one really big transition. I officially left New Hampshire PBS.
That's a big one.
That's a big one. I know. And I think that for me, I needed something a little different.
Okay, wait, hold on. Time out. Because this is huge. This is like I have to acknowledge first that making that decision is absolutely terrifying. No?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think there are a lot of people who are terrified for me for making this decision. You know what I mean? Because it's a really cool job. I've had a fun time at New Hampshire PBS. There's no, wild reason why I'm leaving. It's just one of those things where it's time for me to move on to my next thing. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in that fear, right? I was so scared of making the jump, essentially.
Right. Let's list those fears because I want to know what they look like.
I mean, first it's stability, right? You think of stability first. And when you have kids, that's one of those things where you're like, do I make the decision to stay due to, keeping my family stable, financially stable? Mm-hmm. Or do I make the decision to, possibly make less or go start a new life? But that, it's not just me, it's my kids, it's my partner. Mm-hmm. And, the fear of my partner not supporting me, that's another one. Right. And thankfully my partner did support me, but at the very beginning, not so much.
Yeah.
That was really hard because there were a lot of conversations, a lot of emotions, a lot of, planning for the future together. And even that is scary because then you have to think, okay, 5-10 years down the road. And sometimes people don't think that way. Sometimes they don't think 5 or 10 years down the road.
Right.
And then there's the fear of, okay, what's next?
The unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Like in this, this has kept me in so many bad relationships. No one will ever love me again.
Yes. The fear of rejection.
Right. Because that's part of growth.
Yeah,
is rejection.
Absolutely. Because, I say, I'm leaving this fantastic job and it's a very public space to be in. I'm backing away from that public space. Right. And there's a fear in that because, all right, I'm going to be doing other things now and my colleagues are going to keep moving forward.
All right. So let's go then to the considerations that made you say yes to this transformative decision.
I think that once I really thought about the way I felt every day going to work, and while it was such a really great job, I wasn't like super happy. And so that plays a really important factor, into the decision because that affects you every day. Right. And then it bleeds on everybody else around you with the way you feel during the day. And sometimes it could lead to lashing out. Sometimes it could lead into arguments and you don't intend them to be, but they're coming from that space.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was like, I'm starting to hurt inside and I was feeling a little uninspired. And then that's when I was like, oh man, I need to think about how I'm going to kind of bring myself back. How am I going to bring that inspiration back? How am I going to motivate myself? And then I was like, it's time for me to think about going elsewhere.
Did you have that feeling that you had continued to go back to the same well over and over and over and that maybe it just happens to be dry?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sometimes when you do something over and over and nothing changes, I mean, it makes you feel crazy, doesn't it?
You're
does. Like, oh my God, it's crazy, right? And so when you feel like that's crazy, it's making you feel crazy, then that's a decision to take into.
Well, this is a leap of faith then for an entire family unit. Like you were saying, I'm sure those early conversations were you trying to figure out as a group, as a unit, what next? Now, at this point in time, how are you now supporting each other?
Right now, I mean, I'm hiding in a kitchen. I'm hiding in a kitchen currently, and I really am loving that space. And for my partner, I think he is still getting there, and we've talked about this very openly and honestly, because it takes a little time to adjust to your partner leaving their, a position that kept your family stable for so long. Right. And so he's still kind of getting there, but now he's starting to see the vision. And I think that was really important was that at some point or another, I needed to build some sort of vision.
Yeah.
And so for him, that sort of brought him on board of like, okay, I see the vision. Now I feel like I can get on board to support that.
Even you talking to me about it makes me less afraid because it's quite literally that. And I'm not saying for you, I'm saying for the general idea that in the absence of a vision, you just kind of have this hope and a prayer that things will. Right. Well, with a vision, you actually have a pathway.
Absolutely.
And getting your partner on board. Because I think one of the things in a unit, if you have a stable unit, no matter what it looks like, there can be the feeling of, wait a minute, if you displace the ship like this, I have to then do X or Y to fill in.
Exactly. And that's when you start to really see your dynamic as partners, right? Like how much does your partner do and how much you do? And then you have to kind of weigh, when you start making those transitions, there's one partner that might have to lift up the boat a little bit more while the other partner is still building.
Exactly.
And so, that sometimes people are not willing to go down that route. It's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work and it can be daunting to look down and you're like, oh man, like now I have to pick up even more.
I know my partner feels this way in the role of parent right now, as with everything we've just said, the idea of carrying more.
Daunting, right?
Daunting.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you're like, oh my God, wait. And like your body might have a physical reaction.
Can carry more. Literally can, because dropping so many balls, right? Like, perfect example. We go to soccer practice the other day, picture day. What does my kid show up in? Right. Like picture day. It was communicated to me so much. Right?
I feel like I've had this conversation myself
over and over and over again. And then there's like, again, I'm the problem. It's me. Or is that just parenting?
It's parenting and maybe a little mix of ADHD, but
yes, it's something.
Yeah, it's something. But no, when my husband and I talk about like all the things that we do, there's a part of the transition too was, all right, what are we gaining from this as well?
Right.
And I think that sometimes when you start to see like, okay, what am I going to gain?
Right.
It makes carrying that weight a little bit different.
Exactly. Because maybe it's not even a weight. Maybe you're actually taking off a weight.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and this is so huge because that Surgeon General report also talks at length about the relationship between parent stress and mental health. And so these types of conversations feel like they have everything to do with framing, mental health, processing, getting yourself ready. So are there things that you are doing now in your family, in your unit, that are helping you process what could be a very fearful time?
The fact that you brought up mental health is a really good point, because when you're transitioning, sometimes your mental health is at its lowest point, because you're losing things, you're gaining things, there's a lot changing in your life and you don't have time to process because life doesn't stop. And, when you lose things, you grieve them.
Yeah.
And so like, I will say that there was a point where my mental health was at a real low. And that was another flag for me that I needed to transition. Something needs to change.
Prior to the transition, you were seeing yourself
like get lower and lower into a space that just, put me in a dark space.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, when I saw myself in that space too often, that's when I was like, I need to change something. Something needs to change.
It's wild that you're saying this, because it's one of those things that I think probably so many people feel, but don't know how to honor in a way that gives them a pathway
satisfaction,
forward.
Right? Because there's, you feel that way and then you're like, oh man, like, what do I do? And all you have energy for is sitting there processing those emotions. Right. And I think that one of the most simple things that I started doing was going for a lot more walks. And then I started going to the gym. And so I started going and incorporating movement into my life, because the connection and the factors that come into play with movement and your mental health are so high. And the thing is like, people are like, well, of course, Jasmine. Yes, of course. And I say that in a cheesy way as someone who doesn't like to get moving. I don't like to exercise with purpose. I'm not one of those people that does marathons or anything like that, but movement was the first thing that I was like, I have control over my body. And it's the only way that I can physically process outside of myself all of the transitions in my life.
You know, I'm brought back to that unpacking the scale we were just talking about, but for a person, not a unit. The idea that when you move, you take something out of the mental and put it into the physical, and it kind of lessens that focus, that stirring on the transition itself.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the brain, when I think of transition, I think of a lot of mental movement, a lot of productive thinking,
Right.
ruminating. When I think of then physical movement, my brain doesn't work anymore. It just is there for the ride.
It's just there, exactly. It's just hanging out.
Brain says to the body, where are we going? Body says, I have no idea.
Exactly.
We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we welcome Tony Hebert. Don't go anywhere. Today's show was brought to you by the Couch Family Foundation. As an organization that supports healthy children, strong families, and vibrant communities, the Couch Family Foundation is proud to sponsor the 12th Annual Strengthening Families Summit. The Couch Family Foundation is working with partners like New Hampshire Children's Trust to ensure that all New Hampshire children from birth to age 5 have access to equitable, high-quality, affordable early care and education. For more information, visit couchfoundation.org. Today's podcast was brought to you by Dartmouth Health Children's. As the only comprehensive pediatric healthcare system in the region, Dartmouth Health Children's promotes health, advances knowledge, and delivers the best patient and family-centered care for infants, children, and adolescents. Shared knowledge from expert providers across the system increases their ability to care for patients and families close to home. From annual checkups to specialized treatments, Dartmouth Health Children's is dedicated to ensuring all children live their happiest, healthiest lives. For more information, visit childrensdartmouthhealth.org. That's childrens.dartmouth-health.org. Today's show was also brought to you by NFI North. For more than 40 years, NFI North has served as an indispensable nonprofit resource for delivering mental and behavioral health care services to children, adults, seniors, and families across Maine and New Hampshire. To learn more, visit nfinorth.com. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by friend, father, mentor Tony Hebert, who, along with his children and partner, built one of our family trees for the summit. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The Lego tree. Tell me what it was like for you to build it.
It was fun, man. We, with the schedules and everything, it gets hard to try to get the family together all for one thing if it's not dinner time. So, we were able to sit down and do it. So it was pretty awesome. Yeah. And I was excited that my kids were excited to do it as well. So
that's great.
Yeah.
For you, what was your role in it?
Mine, Dad kind of got in the way a few times. Plus, I got big clunky fingers, and my youngest son is like a Lego master. He looked at the page once and goes, "Oh, this goes this, there." Yeah. So I basically kind of took like a back seat while he was my instructor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you and I get together as often as we can, which is a tricky proposition because of our kids and our families. But lay the groundwork for us. How you doing? What are you doing?
Oh, yeah, doing really good now. Things are, I would say, settling down. And more so like I'm getting used to things as well. Mm-hmm. Work's going really well. I'm still doing a lot of volunteering, a lot of sports activities with the kids. So we're getting pulled in multiple directions, but it's all great things. You know what I mean? It's kind of a blessing to be able to be around to see some of the things that are going on and be a part of them and, meeting the kids and coaches and families. And so it's been going really well.
Well, you say that because it hasn't always been this way. In fact, I think 16 months ago, you went through a massive transition.
Yes, I was released from incarceration. I did 12 years. It was very difficult, honestly. I don't even know where to start. There's just so much. Now,
Jasmine and I in the first half of the show talked a lot about transition. And it can be difficult. It can be also scary. It can be exciting. So prior to your release, were you excited?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Most of my time there, I just, it's like, okay, do what you got to do. Keep your head down, stay focused, school, programs, everything. that I could do that was positive in there. I tried to be involved with, and you get into a routine in there.
Right.
So your routine is the same pretty much every day, all day. Even if it is good stuff, it's still a routine that you get used to. Mm-hmm. So then, like, obviously, I don't want to be in prison. I'd rather be home with my family. So,
right.
You have that ambition of like being back with them and that excitement. Yeah. And then, as it gets closer, you get more excited because that excitement kind of takes over like the thought of like, it's on your mind, but like the ins and outs of like everyday life of the transitioning and everything, like you're not really thinking about that. You're just like, hey, I'm coming home,
Yeah, because how could you, right?
Yeah.
So when you thought about your release, what did you think it was going to be like?
See, I had adjusted and I was very regimented. I'm a very disciplined, regimented person. So to me, I'm thinking, this is just going to be another thing. There's going to be some things I'm going to have to get used to. Yeah, for sure. But I got this. It won't be an issue. I got this. I was a little more confident just because of all the work that I had put in. And I thought I was like very prepared for like the society of everything that happened. And it was definitely a shock.
So what was the reality that you found once you were released?
Just like everything kind of came at once. I was released on a Sunday. Monday, I was at work already driving, thrusted into like all the activities and things that were with the children, that they had going on, the time with the wife, even just the most simplest things like going to stores was just like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like, this is a lot.
That's right. So walk me through that.
I remember this like yesterday. My wife and I were just like, all right, I need to get some things. So we went to Walmart.
Right.
So much. The look, the noise, the activity. There's just things moving, running around, colors, smells, everything was just like, whoa, you know what I mean? And like for a while there, I was like, all right, I got this. I was kind of just like pacing myself. But then like, somebody would walk past you, somebody would kind of bump into you. It's just like, what is happening? Like, this is a lot. And I remember feeling like, I don't really like this. And then, for me, inside the walls, you don't have choices like you have out here. Okay, you want to buy a bag of chips, you got 1, 2, maybe 3 options if you're lucky. I go to get a pair of jeans. My wife's like, hey, what type of jeans do you want? And I'm like, the amount of options that flooded me at one time was like, I was very surprised at how hard that was and how stressful it was. Like something that simple, just you hope to have all these options someday, but then like the reality hits and it's like, there's just so much of one thing. Mm-hmm. Toothpaste. I don't know what to get. Right. I didn't know what to do. It was like panic attacks almost. And I didn't know how to explain it because it never happened. I'm like, what is happening to me? I feel like so overwhelmed. I'm sweating. I'm like, my wife was very helpful where I would just stare at her back. When she walked in front of me, I would just stare at her back so I could just focus on one thing. Yeah, it was a lot.
It strikes me to, we do live and come from a very masculine culture. And the idea of having anxiety, having a panic attack, not only did you not have these before, but being able to identify them and bring them out. Did you run into any sort of cultural issues wrestling with those things that you were feeling?
More so with myself, yeah. I'm just like, what is the deal? Like, what's going on with you?
Yeah.
Until I train myself mentally, spiritually, I'm like, what is happening to me right now? It just completely just dissolved all the foundation and reserve that I thought I had for this image of being a very mentally tough guy. And, that's what people lean on me.
And when all of that stuff dissolved, what did you find there?
I have more work to do. How do I adapt? How do I adjust? How do I cope with this? And the whole culture thing, I wasn't really talking about it. I wasn't explaining it to my wife, so she was kind of like confused about what's going on. And then, I think it came off as like being a little like standoffish a little bit with my family, but I didn't really know what to do with it. I was just like, I'm trying to like toughen through this and, it's not really working. So
there's certain things you can't tough through.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, adapt. It's all about adaptability, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you also had some immediate health challenges, no?
Yes, multiple actually. I had a broken hand and required surgery. And then I had a major thyroid issue that started inside of the walls. You know, I had lost like 30-something pounds. I had hypothyroidism, Hashimoto, osmosis, or something like that. And that gave me rhabdo. Right. So, you know, where your body just kind of like has these unbearable cramps that would send me to the hospital for a while. So I started going through that as I was getting out, which, you know, also kind of like added to all the other stuff I was going through once I was out, because I, you know, lost like 20 pounds. I was like, couldn't work out. Wasn't really myself. It was just like, yeah, it was a lot. And just even with my hand, it was like, oh, something very simple. I hit my hand, thought, okay, it'd be all right, and toughen it through, but it wasn't getting better. And I go to the doctor and like, hey man, this thing's broken. It needs surgery. So it's like that added to everything.
Makes me wonder, because, you know, a lot of times when we talk about incarceration and release, we talk about recidivism and the rate of recidivism, right? With all the things you're describing, and this might be a rhetorical question, how the heck does anybody make it?
So one thing I will say that's so important is, first, don't be afraid to admit, like, you need to talk to someone. You need to get help.
Yeah.
That's one thing. That would be the first thing I would encourage people to do. Get help, preferably from people that's been through what you've gone through. There's steps to being released as far as like adapting. So I reached back out to my life coach. I had a life coach when I was incarcerated. So I reached out to her and said, hey, can we like get things going again? Because I'm really struggling, you know what I mean? And just being open to like talking to the people that are close to you, you know what I mean? They might not understand, but if you have a good support system, and find that safe place to just explain to them so that they understand what you're going through, and that way you could get their support as well.
Yeah.
Don't try to toughen it out yourself. Whatever it is that you're going through, definitely don't be afraid to seek help, and find someone, even if it's just to listen, man.
Well, on the inside, I remember too, you were at the FCC, a Family Connections Center, which helped prepare you a bit for release with regards to family.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's even more so now because my kids are older and they're all their own individuals, and I parent them the same, but also slightly different.
That's what I was going to ask, because there's different layers of transition here. It's you getting out, being you, and kind of surviving that. But now you've got 3 kids who you haven't seen in a while, and you're re-entering their life. Talk to me about the things that you've learned and kind of progressing into that role.
Yeah, so just kind of being able to support the kids and just not make things about myself, you know what I mean? No matter what I was going through, because kids, they just want you home.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that I wanted to make sure that was stayed true to was like meeting the kids where they are, you know what I mean? Letting them have that space where they could talk and just be themselves, and I'm just there to support them and be with them and encourage them and just love them, you know what I mean? You know, these is my kids. I fought so hard to get back to them. I'm here. This is the most important thing to me. I got this.
Well, that doesn't mean there's not going to be frustrations. It doesn't mean there's not going to be constant, pain and irritation and things like that, because you're also having to learn who you are to them in the situation, right? And I imagine that you're probably growing now 16 months later in confidence with who you can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So even with each kid, I think there is that little bit, especially for a while there, I felt like just a guest.
Yeah.
You feel like a guest in your own home for a little while just because you're still getting acclimated to everything, right?
When you look back at kind of the world outside the walls, was there a period where you felt like you were a guest in that world?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I still do. Looking like I went through a phase of I've always been working, but I'm always trying to advance and just, continue to grow. And there are times where I feel like I can't really express things. Like I learned a lot of trades, plumbing, craftsmanship. I can build furniture, and people are like, "Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. Where'd you learn that?" You know what I mean? And I'm like, "Oh, I learned it here." And then at the moment you say it, you either shut a door or you create a barrier.
Right.
So, and that definitely makes you feel like kind of like a guest, where people are like, "Oh, you're very educated. Where did you how'd you do this? Where'd you learn that? And just like, there's a reaction of some sort, right. Positive, negative, or just whatever.
What do you do with that reaction? How do you process it?
I mean, honestly, that's something I have no control over. For me, I'm like, hey, I understand, but this is like a part of my story. You know what I mean? And I just have to be the one to accept it. Like, I accept this is a part of my story. Do I like it, that part? Not so much. Did I learn from it and grow? Absolutely. So it's not something that I'm going to shy away from. It's not something that I'm going to, pretend like it's not there.
You had mentioned your story, and I think that's a great way to frame it. I mean, ideally, where does your story go next?
Right now, I'm just continuing to grow. I have goals and plans for myself and my family, and I'm going to keep making choices that target that keeps that.
Yeah.
Course correction, all right? We have a goal as a family. We have a place with thought. We have how we want to see that looks, and we're going to keep going at it.
Well, Tony, it's been wonderful to see you again. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely. I love it.
And many thanks to the Office of Social and Emotional Wellness, or OSEW, at the NH Department of Education for sponsoring this podcast. OSEW's mission is to advance youth social emotional wellness by collaborating with federal, state, community, and family partners to implement evidence-based, data-driven, preventative, and responsive approaches to lifelong social emotional skills for New Hampshire's students. To learn more about the Department of Education, visit www.education.nh.gov. Today's show was also brought to you by Northeast Delta Dental. At Northeast Delta Dental, we love to see people smile. And as the leading provider of quality dental coverage for Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, we're committed to helping entire communities smile. Whether it's through education, supporting our veterans, or giving and volunteering, we are helping make our communities even stronger. Learn more about Northeast Delta Dental at nedelta.com. We think you'll find a lot to smile about.
New Hampshire Family Now is listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or ask your smart speaker to play New Hampshire Family Now.